Hey YouTube, welcome back to New Rock City. I'm your host Stephen Moss, and each week we bring you a brand new band, interview them, and play some of their music. Today we have a special guest. On episode 15, we have the band Gatherers from Bayonne, New Jersey. Guys, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
The first thing I want to do is just have you guys introduce yourself and say what you do in the band.
My name is Rich. I sing and write lyrics.
My name is Anthony. I play guitar and I also manage the band.
It's kind of hard for me to put a label on the kind of music that you guys make. So when I speak to people about your band, I normally say that if you take Balance and Composure, Thursday, and Deftones and kind of squish them together, you'd get your band. I'm curious how you guys would describe the music that you make.
I would say Thursday's a good.
Deftones.
Deftones, Thursday, definitely. Not that we don't like Balance and Composure. We do like them. I think we're all in our like early 30s, late 20s, so we're all kind of like very tethered to the early 2000s, like screamo, hardcore wave.
The band has been around for a while, but the current lineup has only been together since about 2019, with Adam being the only original member. So most of my questions are going to focus from 2018 to current. However, there was one thing I wanted to ask about, because I came across in a 2012 interview, and Adam said that he used to play guitar, but then he switched to drums because it was so hard to find a drummer that would take the band seriously. So I was just kind of curious, does Adam do any guitar work on the albums, or is he just strictly drums?
Adam strictly plays drums, but Adam also has their album that we are going to be releasing forthcoming. Adam recorded that. He runs a recording studio full time. So Adam's like multi-instrumental, but in the context of Gatherers, he's strictly drums.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Adam and I were in a band back in high school in which Adam played guitar. And I always jokingly think that Adam has an uncle who used to play drums in a hardcore band called Bulldozer, which I think eventually became Agents of Man, like early 2000s, like sort of like New York hardcore, maybe like Cro-Mags type of stuff.
Okay.
So I always have like this feeling that maybe that's where the intuition to play drums came from.
Gotcha. Your music combines aspects of classic literature, visual art, and dark real life stories, and they all balance beautifully on the 2018 album We Are Alive Beyond Repair. And in fact, Rich, you were quoted as saying, "We wanted that album to be as ugly and as horribly truthful as possible." And I think you did exactly what you set out to accomplish, but I was curious, when did you guys know that you hit all the marks that you were going for?
I mean, as far as musically, I feel like that record wouldn't be that record if we wrote that rather quickly, and I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to write that record because we were coming in with like Rob and I, like we had joined the band, and without the time frame that we had to just kind of like adjust with a new lineup, like it wouldn't sound as urgent as it did. There was a lot of pressure and just like figuring out what the next step was for Gatherers with two new guitarists. So I think like you saw like a lot of our influences kind of pour in like unapologetically.
Yeah, and to Anthony's point, at the time, in the middle of writing it, Anthony had joined the band as well as our other guitarist, Rob Talalai. And at the time, Anthony was still living on Long Island, and Rob, he was living down in Asbury Park. So I think there was, if I recall correctly, there was like a good amount of time before the two had met each other, but they were still writing in the band, like just sending recordings and stuff back and forth, I think.
I don't think I met Rob for a few months. Like basically I would send like my guitar parts as demos, and then you guys would meet with Rob in person, and then he would write to those parts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was definitely like a very interesting writing process, like logistically speaking.
Writing remote before a pandemic, we started it.
Yeah.
Your song "The Floorboards Are Breathing" was inspired by a documentary called 1 Minute to 9, which tells the story of Wendy Maldonado, a woman who was tortured along with her kids by the hands of her husband. And one day, she and her eldest son had enough and killed her husband with a hammer. These dark subject matters remind me of an interview that I heard just a couple days ago with Rob Freeman from the band Hidden in Plain View. Rob was talking about his song Bleed for You, and he said it's very sad, weird, but very powerful writing songs like that. And he mentioned that girls would come up to him after the show, give him a hug, and say thank you, and nothing else. And he said you knew right away what she was talking about and what she has gone through. For you guys, what is it like knowing that your music connects with your fans on such a personal and deep level?
I think it's always very flattering when somebody cares enough about gatherers, enough to like come up to us maybe at like a show or something and ask us like, hey, you know, what did this song mean to you, or like what were you guys thinking when you were writing it? Just curious enough about the band to dig a little deeper and just be a little bit more inquisitive about our music. So I mean that's always awesome. We don't really try to like pander to anybody, as like cliche as that sounds. As far as our
Gotcha.
writing goes, we just, our process has always been sort of like we all collectively know when we've stumbled upon like a good idea, and we just sort of pursue it. And then if it feels good and the songwriting itself is considered, we can consider it good songwriting, then we're happy and we'll put it out from there. Yeah, I mean like floorboards, stuff like that. It's kind of hard to think back now because the record feels like it was from forever ago, and we, you know, with COVID and everything, we have a record done. We were supposed to put it out this past year, but you know, obviously like many other bands, it's been delayed because of COVID.
Yeah.
So we've kind of all been so like dialed into that album. It's hard to rewind and think about Beyond Repair. But I would say just like lyrically speaking, like from a content perspective, like I've never really been good at writing lyrics that are biographical or anything like that. So if something in the form of a documentary or like visual art or just anything in general is inspiring and creates a certain mood, or makes me think of something, like I'll definitely go down the rabbit hole and see if there's lyrical content that, you know, I can sort of dig out of that.
Floorboards is one of my favorite songs ever. As of this morning, I have 46,877 songs, and Floorboards is my 15th most played song. When you guys were writing it, did you know that it was going to be different? Did you know it was going to be special?
For me, I think this was the first song that like I worked on with the band.
Gotcha.
And I think the idea for the chorus was there, and it was missing kind of everything surrounding it. And for me, being a fan of like Quiet World, like just hearing that, I was kind of floored about where the band like wanted to go, and I was really excited, just stylistically, like how much the band evolved. And my like Floorboards, I believe, was like just written by, at that point, like the chorus and stuff, like I feel like it was just Rich, Adam, and our bassist at the time, Matt, had like just started that, like just working on that like Skeleton as just a 3-piece before I came in. But it was really exciting just to hear, you know, that as just a moment without like the rest of the song in context. And just hearing that come together organically was really exciting, just as a fan stepping into the role as playing in the band.
You know, there's something really captivating about the woman singing before the song starts. What's the story behind that?
That's our friend Jenna Murphy. She sings in a band called Still Hungry, based out of Asbury Park. We actually called her while we were in the studio. We didn't go into like recording knowing that we wanted to tether that to the song, but we knew we wanted some sort of vocal to sort of introduce the song and sort of create some, I don't know, like an ambiguous mood as to the world that the song was living in. So I reached out to her while we were on Long Island recording the record. I said, here are the lyrics. This is loosely what the song's inspired by, but this is kind of the mood we're looking to capture, and just do whatever feels intuitive to you. And that's what she sent back.
That's really cool. So she wrote that part. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's actually, I don't know if you've seen the video for it, but the woman like in the white dress shirt with her back to the camera, that's her.
I'm about to play the video. I was just curious, what else can you tell us about the video?
It was fucking exhausting making, because we yeah, I mean we filmed that at inside the Asbury Park Brewery. My wife
Wow.
had a contact there, and I don't know, I mean, like we try to make our own music videos and try to be as involved as possible. And it seems like finding a location is always kind of I've found to be like the most challenging thing,
Mm.
because you're juggling a budget and of course you're married to this like idea that you have and you want it to look right. So we knew we just needed a big space to accomplish it, and we got like the drapes and all that stuff. So all the performance parts of the band playing is in the brewery, but it was tiring because I think what time that we loaded in there at like 3 a.m. and
Oh
it was
wow.
there was a nor'easter happening, so we were in downpour loading gear at 3 in the
Oh.
morning, and then obviously putting everything else together. And yeah, that was a good time. We did that, and then all the other like shots with her that are on conversely like on the blue curtain, that was done in my apartment.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right. So here is the video for The Floorboards Are Breathing by Gathers.
Your hands, they trembled. Your hands, they trembled. And oh, all I could see was you running from me.
Welcome back to the show, guys. One lyric that really stands out to me in that, and it actually became the album title, is "We Are Alive Beyond Repair." How did that become from just a lyric in a song to being the title for the album?
I thought it was an interesting lyric. I had the lyric written before Floorboards. I'll just like randomly jot stuff in my phone, like a phrase or a word that I feel like maybe there's something more there to explore. So "We Are Alive Beyond Repair" was just like a line that I came up with, and I didn't know at which point to try using it. And when we had started working on floorboards, it felt appropriate to insert that line in there. But I gravitated towards that for an album title because I felt like it sort of encompassed more than just the song itself. I'm a sucker for anything that's like open to interpretation. Like I don't like explaining lyrics. I like
Gotcha.
the more ambiguity, the more room for interpretation for people that enjoy our band, like the better. And I think we're doing a better job at our craft, you know.
When you were making that album, you said that you were trying to create a mood and that you sought to create a soundtrack to an imagined palette of colors. I don't really know anything about art. How did colors play a role in making the sound for that album?
I feel like when we were writing that record, we were definitely smoking a lot of weed at the time. We don't really do that as much anymore. We didn't really. I feel like the album we have that we're gonna put out is
This is a very sober record that we just wrote.
yeah, it's
Gotcha.
actually it's a straight edge album. Um, but for Repair, we would just get high and like, oh, like this song sounds like the color blue or the color. I know there's a word for it. I don't know. Um, we also like to when we were writing that record. I guess we still kind of approach our songs this way, but especially on that album, we would write songs and always that was the first time in the band where we approached songwriting in terms of thinking about mood and concept and but more so like what does the song or what does the idea make you think of, like can you close your eyes and see a music video for this song that we're in the middle of like writing, you know. So like,
Gotcha.
the band is very like visual in that sense, in terms of like when we're coming up with ideas and stuff like that. Not that the band has a lot of visual content to begin with, but strangely, like when we write our songs, we kind of have those like weird existential type of like conversations, I guess.
Well, that actually piggybacks very well to my next question because I found it interesting, Rich, um, that I read that your very first album that you bought was Rage Against the Machine's Battle of Los Angeles, and you had said you really didn't know anything about the music, but you bought it strictly for the album art. So my question was, visual art seems to be a running theme with your music. How do you think the two coincide and work together?
I'm not in like I can't draw or paint or do anything for the life of me in terms of like visual art. I like to do typography and design. It's just something that's always been important to me with bands. There's been a lot of bands that I've discovered strictly on the album cover alone. You know, this is pre-Spotify. This is like at the time Kazaa was starting to come out and you'd find bands like that or like HXC, mp3.com, things like that. But I would still be going to, we had a record store here in Jersey, it was a chain of them. It was kind of like an FYE called Coconuts. And
Hmm.
I would like walk there after school and just peruse CDs. And if I thought the cover was cool, if it was a band I never heard of, but I thought the cover was cool, I would roll the dice and buy it, you know? And I still kind of do with records now. So like, I guess I kind of carried that with me throughout my life. And like when we started taking gatherers more seriously, it was a component of our, you know, one out of many components, but it was a component of our band that I really wanted us to like take seriously and always be aware of, you know. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's funny, you know, that's like some that's like Nardwar shit that you know that.
Well, before every interview, I try to go back and
Yeah.
reread as much as possible.
Yeah, Battle of Los Angeles I got in Kmart with my mom, and that was like a life changing, one of the life changing records, because at the time like I didn't really know much about heavier music at all. So
That's
still
cool.
my favorite Rage record.
That's amazing, and it all came from the album art. That's awesome. Now you kind of touched on it even in this interview. But you had said before that you don't like writing in a first person perspective because it becomes very tedious. And I think that's kind of interesting. What did you mean by that?
I felt like when I had first joined Gatherers, because Gatherers used to be Gatherer, like the singular form. There was a record called Caught Between, and there was a singer before me named Christian, and that album definitely drew a lot of attention towards the band for the first time. And from listening from an outside perspective, obviously I wasn't in the band at the time, I found it like the lyrical content was very like autobiographical, and I love that. Like I have a lot of records that like I'm fond of that are written from that perspective, but just as a singer, like I've never been able to tap into that. So yeah, I don't know, it's hard to like if I were to sit here and use Gather as like a vessel to write lyrics about like my struggles and my heartbreaks and stuff like that, I feel like it'd be very contrived, and like it probably, like I said earlier, like I like writing from a perspective where it's left up to interpretation.
Mhm.
And I feel like if you boil down lyrical content to be more autobiographical, you kind of lose that.
Gotcha.
It doesn't make it less special or worse or anything like that. It's just I don't know, like it's just not something I was ever able to dial into.
So speaking about your writing, you've had some high praise with your writing. Your lyrics have been compared to the writing styles of Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, and Edgar Allan Poe. And I was just curious, how would you try to sum up or describe your writing style?
Definitely not Edgar Allan Poe. I would argue then we would be like a goth new wave band at that point. I don't really read a lot of literature. I read on Sylvia Plath. I read
Mhm.
some of her works. Again, this was years ago now, so it's hard to think about like what I was thinking about then. But it just all sort of captured a mood that
Gotcha.
I thought would be interesting to explore in the context of a screamo band.
Well, we had mentioned Sylvia Plath, so I just wanted to bring out the song Infinity and Gloom. It paid a tribute to her, and the video for that song, it opens up by a quote from one of her poems. It says, I shut my eyes, and all the world drops dead. I lift my lids, and all is born again. I think I made you up inside my head. And that was taken from her 1953 poem entitled Mad Girl's Love Song. What was it about that particular poem that was so special and unique, or what made you want to tribute your video for that?
Infinity and Gloom, like that took a long time to flesh out the ideas for the video, and we kind of knew like the world that we wanted it to live in. We knew what it looked like, but we didn't really quite understand what we were trying to say with it. So we didn't want it to necessarily be like eye candy that was kind of just like aimless or anything like that. So eventually we figured out the treatment, and again, like it's enjoyable to like sometimes I'll check in on the video and you'll see people like on YouTube and they'll have different theories about what's going on in the video, which is neat. Like a lot of them are wrong. The line from the poem was kind of an afterthought, so it didn't
Gotcha.
really inspire the song. It was kind of just like something I discovered after the video, where I read
Oh,
it and I
cool.
thought like, oh, interesting. Like just sheer coincidence, it kind of captures the elements of like what's happening in the video. So
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I thought the poem was first. That's really cool. So I am going to play the video for Infinity and Gloom. What can you tell us about the video?
video was filmed in Patterson. Michael Weatherby and Danielle, her last name escapes me right now. I'm sorry, Danielle. They are the two that are acting in it. And it was another situation where we were loading in at like 2 or 3 in the morning. We did the floorboards video and Infinity, if I remember correctly. We did it like the same week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I remember being in the floorboards video. There's a scene with like a fish, like a goldfish in the drinking glass. I remember being online at Walmart at like 12 in the morning buying that fish, but like we were on our way to shoot Infinity, and I went into Infinity like I didn't sleep that night. I was that was the first video where like I like directed completely on my own. Usually with our other videos, like
Oh,
it's more as far as like directing goes, it's a little bit more collaborative. I'll either work alongside my wife or like our cinematographer Matt Bastos has been with us for all of our videos. But that was the first time where like I solely wrote it, I directed it. It was our first time working with actors, which I found very intimidating. I was meeting up with them a lot in the city, trying to explain this idea that like at the time I didn't really think I didn't really fully understand what I was going for, but I was trying to get it across to them. It worked out. It was a really fun project, and everyone was like, you know, brought good energy to the table. And yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite videos that we've done.
nice. Well, it was a great video, and the woman who played the main character was awesome. Like, she had so much emotion and just was great. So here is the video for Infinity and Gloom by Gathers.
We fled to the river on a funeral
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Before we talk about your 2 new singles, I wanted to play one more song off the album, We Are Alive Beyond Repair. What can you tell us about the song Tape?
That's probably my favorite song on the record. I know we were opening up with that for a while on tour. I think Anthony brings a lot to the table with his guitar work. It's got a lot of interesting like textures and stuff going on. Yeah, I love it's just like I don't know. We were opening up with that for a while. We felt like it was definitely like whenever we would go on stage on tour and like not say anything and literally just drop into Tape, it was kind of like a statement because of I don't know, just the way it drops. It feels like you're sort of kicking a door in.
No, that's definitely my favorite song on that record. I feel like when we wrote, like, because we were together when like that was like coming together. That wasn't like a remote thing. That was like in Adam's room, and like I feel like I still remember like the excitement of like writing that. That's one of the songs that like I'll just play like on my own at home. Like it's really cool. Just as far as like just the choices that we made, like, and Adam and Matt like helped steer the ship on like just as far as like where dynamics would shift. And I think this song kind of touches on everything that like being a fan of Gatherers, like I wanted Gatherers to touch on. So it was cool. Like I was still in the like I'm in a band that like I'm a fan of type of like, so it was like a very like weird headspace for me to be in, like without like nerding out over like the band that I'm playing in a room with. That feeling has since gone away completely. But no, I think that is for as far as like an opener for like live, I think that is like exactly what Rich said. It's a statement of like it touches on everything that like whoever's watching us is going to hear for the next 45 minutes.
Very cool. So here is Tape by Gathers. Welcome back to the show. Kerrang! Magazine had an article about your single Sick Sad Heart, and in it, they quoted you as saying, "This one lives in a completely different world from the songs on We Are Alive Beyond Repair. What makes Sick Sad Heart unique and so different?
I forget how this like one came together. It was definitely like a one-off writing session for us. It started with Rob, like that really bludgeoning, like bassy, like sound you hear in the beginning. That's Rob playing an OP1 through like some pedals and shit. I don't know. You can probably speak to that, Anthony. It's that I feel like that's probably I feel like Sick Sad Heart is our best impression of Cross Out the Eyes by Thursday.
Oh, nice.
In terms of just like how, well, I mean, there are choruses, but I guess like with the outro and everything, like it's kind of linear in a weird way.
I think so. Like that main like guitar part came from Rich picking up Adam's acoustic and just playing like the three bass notes that guitar part revolves around. I just heard like something from that. Like I just loved those three like bass notes in the order that he was just like strumming. And I don't know if he was strumming with intent for like writing the song, but it was that, I think that really was the catalyst for like writing this song. We never do this, but we had like that song, like we wrote 4 days in a row, if I remember, because our bassist at the time was from Richmond. So like we were spending like days in the room just trying to write with no expectation. And I feel like that song and one of the new songs that are on this record came from like that session.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But it was the first time where we were able to kind of step out of like this should sound like Gatherers, and this should just be something that we want to hear now when we're in our late 20s, early 30s. Like not that we didn't want to hear Gatherers, but it was just like what do we want to hear if there was no expectations of what this band should sound like?
Adult contemporary.
This was the Kenny G of post-hardcore.
No, that's pretty cool. One of the most interesting things about that song is how from start to finish, you know, it's taken a listener on this emotional roller coaster, but then it just suddenly stops without a resolution. And it's almost like the coaster just fell off the tracks. So I was wondering, what was the mindset of making that just abrupt ending?
I think that's just all Rich.
I don't remember. I think the intent was like, I'm just going to cite like the songs we were thinking about at the time. To us, it was like this, it was sort of like the outro to like Karma Police. Like It just was very like repetitive and started like the car starts to run out of gas. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yep.
And that's kind of where we wanted to take things dynamically, take you on like a journey, and then just sort of pivot completely left and just go into some completely different thing, and then sort of end on that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, also in that article, Rich, you had mentioned that Sick Sad Heart won't be on this new album. Was this just kind of like an experimental song, or kind of what's the story behind it?
To Anthony's point, we had a bassist. He was coming from Richmond at the time. His name was Zach Crockett. That's who wrote and played on Sick Sad Heart. And I think at the time, we didn't know if we were going to start writing a new album. Eventually, we realized it wasn't the right time to pursue writing a complete record. So yeah, it was just, I think it was like a one-off. Maybe we even entertained like writing an EP. We were just so excited that we were playing around with a synth for the first time. So we had all these fantasies of like writing a industrial inspired EP, or like, hey, it's our time to do our best Nine Inch Nails interpretation, but like a screamo version. And yeah, like I said, we had a bassist. He was coming from Richmond, and so it was kind of like just to bring everybody in the room together was a bit challenging. So yeah, we wrote it, and then we just sort of put it down and said, all right, we'll pick up when it's time to pick up writing again.
Right on. So here is Sick Sad Heart by Gathers.
There's no medicine to take, no bids on the collection plates, and you wear your mother's face with the green of welted polyethylene. I am my father's son, I am drunk with all his blood. Guess you carry what you keep of your failure to breathe. spirals by. Hey, what's the difference? You're deer in the headlights.
And welcome back to the show. We started the show talking about We Are Alive Beyond Repair, and that was a great album. It was successful. What did you learn from making that album that's kind of helped you and carried over into your new album that you're making?
We have a better idea of what we want to sound like than the producer we're working with.
Oh, right on.
Yes, I agree, 100%.
I think the biggest difference was we had all the time in the world to write this record. There was no involved, like there was a label involved, but there was no expectation of, he was, No Sleep was just like, yeah, get it to me when you can. There wasn't anything. The only expectations were like the ones that we set on ourselves. I think that was the biggest thing, is just writing in a room with no timeline of when this has to be released. And this was like, we were writing, pre-pandemic. I think writing went over, we started in 2018. Like right as Beyond Repair got released, we started writing like on tour.
So the songs for these new albums, they started being written in 2018?
At least one of them.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah, I think technically when we were on tour with Bent Knee in 2018, that's around the time where we started like slowly cataloging ideas. It started with like a little riff that like Rob would play on stage when we were sound checking, and it was sort of like, oh, that's cool, like save that, like let's revisit that. And then I think around 2019 is when we actually started pursuing writing seriously. We also, for this album, we did a lot more than ever of like focusing on like top melody and trying to construct things on like an acoustic, and like just honing in on the ideas overall, and not necessarily getting 5 people in a room to sort of jam their way through a song. So I felt like, we were all very much at a point where we were comfortable and okay with being vulnerable around each other in terms of presenting ideas, and not necessarily feeling shy or embarrassed about sending in ideas, because inevitably there will be some corny ones from time to time. It really helped us accomplish like what we wanted out of this album, and that was really just good songwriting. And like Anthony said, like just doing what we want to do. No producers, we did everything ourselves.
A lot of it started with like, I would send like just voice memos of guitar parts to Rich, because he's my barometer about what's corny in every aspect of like how I live my life. Yeah, like Ad Nauseum was a riff I was like definitely sure he was going to tell me to fuck off with, and then like
No.
uh
I loved it. I thought it was very like, when he sent me the Ad Nauseam riff in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is something that could have, in another world, could have came off of You Come Before You, Poison the Well.
Oh, nice.
That's one of my favorite records. It was just like dissonant and noisy and chaotic, but you could still understand what was going on.
yeah, that's also a big record for me, like throughout the last 15 years or so of my life. It's this record, it should like this is the first time Rich came to the band with like ideas for songs that he wrote on guitar, and a lot of this was him like showing me guitar parts that he wrote, or like verses or choruses, or like a full song, and just saying, can we make something out of this? And that was really exciting, just to have a fresh take on songwriting that I wouldn't have, because it's coming from it's coming from the perspective of the person who has to sing over it. And I think that's where a lot of these melodies come through, is like, even with like guitar parts that I would send Rich, he would like play them and change them to suit vocals, and that for the first time, like vocals weren't like added after the fact, not that like it was ever an afterthought, but like this was just let's make sure that this album like can showcase like melody first, and then figure out everything else.
The newest single is Ad Nauseam I Drown, and it came out on May 11th, 2020. Will that song be on the new album, or is that also kind of like Six Sad Heart, where it will be? Very
Yeah.
cool.
I think it's like track 8 or something.
It's
Maybe
deep.
not.
In
It's
there.
it's
You have
pretty
some work to get to it.
yeah.
Gotcha. Well, and as you also touched on, that this song was completely produced and mixed and written like all by the band. That's pretty cool. What was that process like? Because you did everything from start to finish on this one. That was pretty cool.
It was very enjoyable. I think this was the least, like, there was no point of stress within the band of writing this. And I think I would say that's a first, you know.
Gotcha.
Not that we're like a dysfunctional band or anything like that, but like we're all very invested in the band and we want it to be the best that it can be. And you know, at the time whenever we're writing a record, we have like we always have a much more grandiose vision of what it turns out to be, but we know it's our best foot forward, you know. So I think with this one, we didn't get caught up in worrying about that. And like I mentioned before, like I at least me personally, I felt like I felt comfortable enough around my bandmates to be vulnerable to send them ideas. I don't play guitar, like I'm not an
Gotcha.
instrumentalist at all, but I can pick up a guitar and like just play like root notes and chords just to communicate an idea. So there would be a lot of me sending little snippets and ideas to the band, and I'm in a band with 4 like dudes that are multi-instrumentalists and way more talented than me. So it was cool to be able to just express ideas and take them to my bandmates and be like, hey, I have this like chorus in mind, or I have this top melody. It kind of goes like this. These are the layman chords to get the idea across, but like, how can we make it interesting? You know, how can it not sound like cock rocky or anything like that? So, and it was a lot of that kind of dialogue within the band. And we also have a new bassist who had joined as we started writing this, Sidhu and Dallingem. I'm gonna go for it.
That was close.
I think that's pretty good.
That was pretty good. You got at least all the syllables.
Yeah. I try to. So Sidhu play everything from the tuba down to like the harpsichord.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
He's annoyingly talented.
Yeah, he's annoyingly talented. He was in the band at the time. He joined the band as we started writing all this, and I think for the first time more than ever, I'm like, wow, like this is it. This is the final lineup. Like this is the Voltron of like where this band needs to be to accomplish like our vision of the band. So it was fun. I felt like this was a really fun process. Like, you know, we work out of Adam's recording studio, Timber Studios in Bayonne. So we do have the luxury of having a space to just chill and be creative and take our time. And to Anthony's point, we didn't really have a label or a deadline. Chris at No Sleep believes in the band and has a prior relationship with Anthony. So like going into everything, he you know, he kind of thankfully had like faith in us and that we would just do what we do best and deliver something special. And yeah, I'm really proud of the record. We definitely are excited. We got some a few like different like guest spots on the record too, which is a first for the band. Like we've never done that before.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's pretty much it. I'm excited.
Well, I want to go a little further on that point because you talked about how the band has matured, gotten more comfortable. But Rich, when talking about your new single, you were quoted as saying, "I honestly believe this is the best songwriting ever in the career of the band." So I was curious, how has the songwriting changed over the course of the years? What makes it different?
That's the most pretentious shit I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So sorry.
We wrote the song for quotes like that.
Nice.
I probably meant it more from a place of like, it's crazy to think we put that out a year ago already. Jesus.
Yeah.
It was just the excitement of we wrote this song. It came together so easily. I mean, the thing was written in like 3 days.
Oh,
As
wow.
far as like, yeah, like the composition of the song, it was all written, and it was so like blatantly like different. And, like I get excited when like I think about Gatherers and like fantasize like, oh, like what's the next record gonna sound like? Like what could it possibly morph into for us as a band, you know? And hearing that for the first time, I don't know, I felt like I'm 32, so I felt like younger, like a younger mindset of like the excitement of being in a band for the first time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I felt like it still had the same, it had the DNA of Gatherers, but it was just like something completely different. And we all love like the chorus. It was like very satisfying.
I agree with that. And like the chorus is not like, as far as like chord structures go, it's not very poppy until Rich sings over it, because it's a lot of notes that shouldn't work together, and that's just kind of taking pages out of Poison Wall or Glassjaw, or even Deftones, where you just kind of put notes together that doesn't necessarily work, but as long as like there's a melody to go over it, we can make anything a chorus. I think this was also when we decided we were going to write a record in a different tuning than just standard, and like make our guitars lower and just make everything sound bigger and like boomier. And I also think, to like Adam's credit, he was very patient with what we want to accomplish on record. Because if we were working with any other producer, they would have told us to leave immediately.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, boomier, I think, is definitely a good way of describing it. And like with like Sidhu in the band and just having a fresh perspective from somebody that shares a lot of the same influences as us, but has his own, outside of the band. Like Sidhu's very like smart in the writing department. Like he's very economical. So like when he decides to do something, it could literally be one note, but it's so impactful to the song. Like I guess his bass lines, just like in that intro, like when everything drops, they're so sparse, but like they to me, it makes like the boominess and the impact of like the song and everything like that. And
Very cool. So we'll go ahead and play that for everyone.
Caressing in the love, hanging over me.
and welcome back to the show. In an article dated August 18th, 2020, you said that you were just wrapping up mixing 11 songs. So are you completely done now with this new album?
Yeah, the album's been sitting in a Dropbox folder for over a year. It's
Oh, wow.
done. The artwork's done. The track listing's done. It's just been living in our phones. I think it's 11. Yeah, it's 11 songs.
11.
We were entertaining doing 12 songs. There was an idea that Rob had that was kind of like a slow burn, but like I think at that point we were checked out. We knew that it was something to revisit down the line, so we decided at 11 songs.
What makes this one so different?
I think it's poppier. I feel like every band eventually in their careers they pivot and make like a more melodic focused album. I say poppier loosely. I mean in like terms of for gatherers,
Gotcha.
it's a bit more melodic. I feel like it's good because when it hits and it is heavy and there are heavier, screamier moments, it makes them all the more special. I didn't really like think about lyrical content the same way I did in Repair. I wasn't really like thinking of like, oh, this documentary inspired me to write this or whatever. It literally like if the lyrics felt right and it lived in the song, then I just went with it. And they're very like fragmented. Like that's what I love about bands like Deftones or like Interpol. The lyrics kind of sometimes are there just to serve the melody more than anything. So that's not to say like we're not writing with intent, or or lyrics aren't written or are not written with intent, because they are. But there was a Chino interview that I listened to last year, and he was talking about that, and I thought it made me more confident in doing that with Gatherers in terms of like not overthinking about, are these lyrics the most profound thing on paper? And they're not, but like, does it capture a certain essence? Does it serve the melody? Does the melody serve the song? And so on and so forth.
About the new album, you also said in that article that Gatherers knows that this album will be divisively received. So I was curious, what about this album would be so divisive?
I think what's cool about Gatherers and what we all kind of love about the bands that influence us is that there are a lot of bands out there where they have like a discography and every album is completely different. And it's not necessarily like, hey, let's become an indie band tomorrow for the sake of being one. But we kind of like that the discography that we have so far, you can sort of visit each album and have your own experience from one album to the next. I would say there are people that are older, like Gatherers fans, that love the Caught Between era that don't necessarily like anything else that we put out, and vice versa. But as we mentioned, I think like this record is definitely way more melody based. There's a song where pretty much the entire song is a duet with myself and a friend of ours, Courtney. She sings in the band Bentley. So
That's
it's sort of
pretty
just
cool.
like taking like chances like that.
Gotcha.
And again, we're like a screamo band, like a post-hardcore band, so just sort of doing things a little bit more unconventionally.
What's been your most proudest moment in making that record or this new record?
I don't think we've had it yet. Sitting in a Dropbox for a year.
I think I'm proud of like I think it's got a lot of replay value. I don't like listening to like my own voice a lot, so like I'll shy away from listening to Gatherers, but this record especially, like I can sit and listen to it for like weeks.
Oh, nice.
And I feel like everybody in the band brought something special to the table, and you can kind of go back into like pretty much every song and pick up something new about it. We were definitely very, very detail oriented as far as like all the little extra like accoutrements we would add into the songs afterwards, like extra like percussions and pads and stuff like that. And again, this kind of all goes back to what Anthony said, like not having a deadline or a label kind of like pushing us to deliver something incomplete, so we kind of just got to do everything we've wanted to do for a long time in an album. So I'm proud of that. But yeah, it's hard to say, like we haven't put it out yet. I think the reception to like Ad Nauseam, if that's like a preview of like how people receive the record, then great. I like Ad Nauseam. I definitely think we have like we have better songs than that on the album, to be honest. So like,
Gotcha.
I'm excited to hear what people think.
Do you guys have a set date, or what's kind of like your mindset approaching the release of this new album?
The mindset is we're going to release it when it feels right. COVID doesn't
Gotcha.
really have too much to do with it at this point. We just want to do it in a way that feels very much like we have control over the narrative and not everything else that's going on in the world. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping us from dropping it, next Friday, which is also a very nice thing to have. Is there's like we're completely in control of the narrative.
And in 2019, you had your first UK tour, and I was curious, how was your music received in the UK?
The UK was great. Europe was awesome. Europe was sometimes unapologetically kind of straightforward, where people would go to multiple shows and tell us that they enjoyed us tonight, but not the night before. So those are always tough conversations to have. But I thought it was a great experience overall for the band.
Nice.
And we seemed pretty well received. Like it was an amazing opportunity that we were kind of working towards for a while. For a little bit, the tour seemed like it wasn't going to happen, and then like 6 months later, we were told it is going to happen. So like it was really exciting for us. The response, just the fact that people knew who we were in a bunch of different countries was just something that I don't think we ever thought was going to be the case. And it was just, I thought the experience itself was just very, very good, and also teaching us just a different way to like tour, because no matter where you tour, it's different. It's not just like one set of rules and you just go out in a band and you tour. So I think it was a cool first experience for all of us to kind of share.
That's awesome. Now, I looked on the app Bands in Town, and it says that on July 8th, you guys are playing a show in the UK. Is that still on the books, or what's that going to be like?
As right now, it's on the books. It's a festival.
Nice.
World's playing. A bunch of bands are playing. Who knows if it's going to happen, but it's on the books.
Very cool. Well, unfortunately, I have not had the privilege to see you guys live yet, but I did see the show that you have on YouTube. That was recorded on April 28th in Brooklyn, 2018. And I have to say, I was very impressed because some bands don't sound the same live like they do on the album. You guys sounded awesome live. I was impressed how you can go from screaming to almost a whisper back to screaming, like almost seamlessly. And I was thinking of an interview I heard of James Hetfield from Metallica, and he said before each show, he drinks honey mixed with a little whiskey. And I was wondering if you had any voice remedies or anything you do before a show to make it where you can do that with your voice.
I think that was the Saint Vitus show that's on YouTube. There's not a lot of YouTube videos of us playing live. I would say sort of like James Hetfield. My ritual is more like Claritin and like nasal sprays, because I have really shitty allergies, so I can't guarantee that the vocals are always going to be great every show. But this is hardcore, and there's a margin of people
That's
being
funny.
forgiving, and I guess you could fake it, But thank you. Yeah, that was a good. I think that was a pretty good set when we played. We like playing Saint Vitus. We played there a few times, and I feel like so far, knock on wood, every Vitus show, we've had like a good set. Like
Gotcha.
There's been shows where like on tour where like we know collectively like, yeah, this could have been better, and then there's nights where we know we like knocked it out of the park. And kind of going back to like the tour in Europe, I felt like that experience brought the band closer together because of how well received we were in Europe, how friendly people are, how invested kids are, just in like a live music setting. And I think that kind of just psychologically, it just allows us to just be on stage and not have any second thoughts about anything, and just be able to perform well. And I felt like there were a lot of nights on Europe where the live set was really good. Especially like my favorite show was in Modena, Italy. That was a really fun one.
Oh,
because it was packed out, but the stage was kind of like really low to the ground, and that's what we like. And then there was a show. Where was it? Was it Wiesbaden? It was like a factory. There was like 1,000 people.
We slept upstairs?
No, with like the huge, with the rave happening downstairs.
Oh shit. Yeah, no, that was Cologne.
Cologne. That was a cool show. That was the biggest show this band has ever played so far. It was like a little over 1,000 people in this BDSM warehouse.
Yeah. London was remarkable for 2 nights.
Well, yeah, London was sick. That was really cool. And then we felt bad because we played London twice, same venue. So naturally, a lot of people came to both shows. The band we were out with was Casey. It was their breakup tour. So, and there were these 2 friends that came to both shows. And the first night they approached us after the set, and they asked us why we didn't play Infinity and Gloom. And I said, honestly, like we tried to switch it up, We'll play it tomorrow, I promise. And we never delivered on that promise.
No, we didn't.
That's
I think
funny.
that's the song that we played the least.
Yeah, we're not good at playing that song live.
It's a very challenging song to play.
Yeah.
The song is great. I love the song, but it's very hard for it to work live. Like there have been times where it's worked out great and we're stoked on it, but there's other times where it's just like not clicking, and maybe it sounds fine, but like it's just not clicking.
That's interesting. So what about that song makes it hard to play live?
I think like some of the songs that we have, like a song like Infinity and Gloom, there are songs that just come across a different way in context of like an album or like just through headphones versus live.
Gotcha.
I think like Infinity and Gloom is one of those songs where maybe if the band is at a point in our career where we could procure more people on stage or add in terms of like what we're capable of pulling off live, that's like a song that would benefit from an extra member or two.
Yeah.
And it's also like a thing of like, you know, it's a matter of, we have 30 minutes on stage, we have 40 minutes on stage. Most of the shows, we don't ever go into any of these shows thinking like anybody even knows who Gatherers is or what our music sounds like. So it's our job to sort of bullet point that as best as we can. And we still like to think about like the dynamics of like a set list. You know, we don't really go into shows thinking like it's hard to resist the temptation of going and playing live and saying, let's just play all our bangers. You know, let's play floorboards and let's single, and then like,
Sure.
Whereas we like to sort of just challenge ourselves and think of like, well, okay, it's almost akin to like writing a track listing. It's like we want to think of what's the best way we can present ourselves in 30 minutes and in a live setting. And sometimes like Infinity and Gloom, especially like if you're not familiar with the band, we've had experiences where depending on where it sits in the set, it kind of creates a maybe like kind of like an awkward dynamic shift. Maybe it's one of those songs where like if we end up playing and we have like an hour to play and present more material, it could work, but in your normal show setting, we really can't.
Gotcha. The last thing I like to do is kind of like give the floor to you and say, what would you like to say to your fans?
Thank you for sticking with us while we make 0 announcements for years at a time.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the people that are into Gatherers and have stuck with us this long are probably some of the most patient people in the world, because we're not that active on the internet lately. We don't really like putting things out aimlessly. So there's a time and place to talk, and there's a time and place to sort of be quiet and just observe and work on things behind the scenes. I would say younger fans, anybody that's like maybe under 25 at this point, like definitely I encourage people, younger Gatherers fans, to sort of look into the bands that we have outwardly have expressed have influenced us. We're hitting an age now where like we can talk to kids at shows and we'll say like, oh, do you like Thursday? Never heard of them.
Oh, that hurts.
You like Glassjaw? What's that? You know, so even Deftones, you know, these are massive bands, so it's hard to imagine that. But like, there's a lot of kids that'll come up to us and they'll, hey, you guys remind me of like Movements.
Gotcha.
Great band, but like definitely not the era that we are sort of living in, you know. And
yeah.
Sometimes we have kids that'll come up to us and sort of say the band reminds them of a band that we've never heard of. And that's cool too. It's interesting, you know. So I would say like for younger fans of the band, you know, definitely check out some of the bands that we've said have inspired us. It might create more of a context as to like where we're coming from.
And I would kind of encourage that for anyone they listen to, because I mean, looking into, you know, a band like Thursday's influences to kind of get a like just an idea of where they're coming from, or like Rich said to us, like I think that's the like still an exciting part about music is kind of getting into the headspace of the performers, where most of the time it's not just a surface level thing where they might sound like they're contemporaries, but typically the people involved in songwriting are, you know, they have outside of like the scene of like what they're doing, like they have influences where it comes from, like where all of that comes from. And I think that's kind of a lost thing, where now Spotify just kind of panders to like, if you like this artist, you'll like these 7 artists that sound just like them, instead of listening to Glassjaw and knowing, okay, we can get a Fugazi reference out of them. You can get like, you know, Deftones or like a Helmet, like, you know, or even like a Bad Brain influence out of it, because you have to do that digging to see what inspired it. And I think that's kind of lost on people right now, because it's just
when we were kids, like we were talking, because we're actually in the middle of like designing our physical record, like the vinyl layout and stuff for our new album.
Oh, nice.
And Anthony and I were recently talking about like how when we were growing up, how special it was to sort of take the time to read liner notes, which is like a lost art now. I mean, obviously there's still liner notes. I mean, who really goes out and like sits and reads all of them and stuff like that? And that's kind of how we found bands, you know, like you'd pick up an Alexis on Fire record, and then next thing you know, you're like, who's you know, Jude the Obscure? You'll look that up, you know, or Thursday will inevitably lead to Seisha, you know. So I feel like younger kids don't necessarily approach music like that anymore. Everything is algorithm informed, and it's convenient, but it's definitely not special.
You had to kind of work to like a record. Like, you know, I like Rich said with like Coconuts, I had that in the wall next to me, and CDs were $25. So I bought Bosch's Everything You Want to Know About Silence. And even if I hated it, I was gonna sit and listen to it because I didn't have $25 at 16. So like you kind of had to work to like music, where now it's just so easy to press skip and be in a completely different genre, where you know there's something about working to like something, because I don't think it's a lot of things are like whatever the medium is for art, like kind of have to work for it in order for it to be like have a lasting impact.
I will have a link in the description below with your YouTube, Instagram. For those watching, you can also catch Gatherers on all streaming services. That was all the questions I had. I really appreciate you guys coming on the show. For those watching at home, tune in next week and we'll have a brand new band. Guys, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
all right, man.